I found that a lot of times when I'm feeling the impulse to be sexual and express myself that way, really what I'm looking for is to connect and express that energy. Today, I'm going to give you 5 specific ways that you can regulate a high sex drive. Now, if you're anything like me and a stiff breeze blows by and you're ready to get busy, then having a high sex drive may have become a challenge or an inconvenience even at times. I know in my relationship with my wife, especially in the past 5 years since we've had children and our lives have become much more dense and full, the opportunities for intimacy and sex have become much more scarce. So any of my parents out there, I know you guys could relate. Anybody who has a family, who has big obligations and responsibilities, making time for that intimacy can be challenging. But unfortunately, that didn't really do anything to my sex drive. I've always had a really high sex drive, and it's something that I've had to really learn how to resolve and be with over the past several years. So what do you do? Because I know in the past, with that high sex drive and my wife either not being interested or not being available for sex and connection in that way, I've resorted to things like looking at pornography and masturbation and self-pleasuring, which I'm definitely not demonizing or denouncing, but there's other ways that I've learned that I could redirect that energy instead of just looking for that immediate instant release. So I'm going to go through 5 of the ways that have really helped me in the past 5 years, especially since we have kids now and with starting businesses and just having really busy lives. So the first way to regulate a high sex drive is exercise. One of the greatest outlets for that energy that boils up inside of us is to exercise, to move your body, to sweat. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes when I'm feeling really interested in having sex, feeling like that energy's coming up in me, I can go and exercise and really exhaust my body and use some of that energy to move myself through space and ultimately get that endorphin release that I was looking for without having to have sex or pleasure myself. So exercise is a really excellent outlet for this because number 1, you're moving your body. It's super healthy. Number 2, it regulates the energy in a productive way, and it also helps to reduce some of those impulses and desires. Not always. Sometimes I exercise and I get more randy, but most times once I spend that energy, it doesn't occupy my mind anymore and I can move on. So a second way to regulate a high sex drive is to channel that energy into something creative. So my belief and understanding is that sexual energy is one of the most creative energies that there is. And if it's arising or percolating within our bodies, then all it needs is an outlet. The problem is most of the time we look to just have sex or get that orgasm or release to make that energy go away. But if we can direct and channel that energy into something creative like writing or art or building, anything that is creative, oftentimes, again, just like exercise, it helps to reduce the weight of holding all that energy. So exercising, channeling that sexual energy into something creative. If you have a high sex drive, something else that's really, really helpful, especially in relationship, is to create new ways to build intimacy in your relationship. So guys, we're simple, right? Most of us are really simple. When we feel connection or want to express connection with a partner, sex is number 1 on the list. But there are so many other ways to create intimacy with our partners, right? So having a really deep conversation, doing something new together, like taking a dance class or cooking a meal that you've never cooked before, reading a book to your partner or having your partner read to you. There's so many ways to connect and to be intimate with our partner. Oftentimes might lead to sex and those forms of intimacy and connection. But I've found that a lot of times when I'm feeling the impulse to be sexual and express myself that way, really what I'm looking for is to connect and express that energy. It doesn't necessarily need to be having sex. So something that you can try are some of these different intimacy practices that you can do with your partner, which in turn, especially in speaking with women, including my wife, those other forms of intimacy often create more possibilities for sexual connection. So I know we as guys, we become singular focused and efficient, and we just want to get to the deed and do it. Turns out that there's many other ways that we can approach it. So considering different ways of expressing and connecting intimately with your partner or with whomever you want to express that energy with. Okay, the next one is to figure out what it is that you're avoiding. Now, this can be a tricky one because it's very sneaky. I know for me, in those moments where I feel a sexual urge or impulse, especially when my wife's not around and there's no rhyme or reason why that energy came up, a lot of times my brain is giving me that message that it wants a release because of some sort of stress I'm experiencing, some sort of doubt, some fear that I'm looking for, and my brain wants a hit of that dopamine, that endorphin release. So it tells me, hey, I should go see if my wife wants to have sex, or hey, I should go sneak away and masturbate and get that orgasmic release. But a way to regulate that energy is to go back inward and say, what is it that I'm avoiding in this moment? What is it that I'm trying to run away from? What is it that I don't want to face off with, where a sexual release would feel much more pleasurable, much more desirable than facing off with this fear I have? And if you can find the root of it, if you can really get curious and dig deep into what it is that you're trying to avoid, a lot of times that need, urge, impulse to have a sexual release will go away. Of course, it requires that you be courageous enough to face off with yourself, but that's what we're here to do anyway, isn't it? So that's 4 ways to regulate a high sex drive. One more that I found is really helpful for me, and there's many different ways to do this. I'll share with you my preferred way. The 5th way to regulate a high sex drive is to use your breath to move the energy. All right, we already talked about exercise as a way to move the energy physically, but sitting in stillness, recognizing and feeling where that energy is arising from, breathing into it, taking a deep breath in through your nose, and directing that breath right to where you feel it, somewhere in your genitals, down in your pelvic region, wherever you're experiencing those sexual urges and that energy wanting to come up. Breathe into it and then exhale through the mouth and let that energy move. And do a cycle of 20 to 30 breaths. Eyes open, eyes closed, but somewhere where you're sitting down, sitting still. Breathe into that energy and notice what comes up. Notice what arises for you in your mind, in your body, sensually, feeling of your senses, what happens as you breathe into that space. Oftentimes, like I said, it's just an energy that needs to be moved. And the first option we usually come up with is have sex or masturbate. So if you don't want to be at the mercy of can you get sex, or is there somewhere I can sneak away with to masturbate? These are some options to how you can regulate your sex drive. I know that it can be really inconvenient given the life circumstances. If you are one of those guys where you're just always down, you're always down to get busy, and you always feel that energy moving through you, then these are some options for how you can move that energy in a different way. I won't even say more effectively, but just in a different way, because sex is not inherently bad. I don't believe masturbation is inherently bad. But if we're always going to the same strategies for expressing and moving an energy that exists in our bodies, then we're limiting our experience of that energy and what we can do with it. So if you're one of those guys out there that has a high sex drive, go rewatch this video. If you know that some of your friends, or maybe you're a female and you're watching this, or a partner of yours has a high sex drive and doesn't know what to do with it, please share this video up, and please subscribe to this channel if you like the message and how we're dropping it here. Head over to risingman.org to find out how you can become a bigger part of the Rising Man community today. And in the meantime, y'all, rise up and claim your destiny.